This week on Supercars Talk, I wrap up the Pirtek Perth SuperNight. This weekend, the Supercars headed out west. We saw them racing at night for the Pirtek Perth SuperNight. For some reason, I found that really hard to say last week. Commentators said it over and over again all weekend, and I was really jealous. So I've been practicing at it, and I'm starting to get there. So this weekend, we saw a number of new paint jobs for the weekend. First off, Todd Hazelwood, SP Tool sponsorship. Bit of a look back at the old Stone Brothers / Erebus cars there. Car looks great. It looked great under lights. Definite improvement. Hopefully this paint job stays for the rest of the year. Hopefully there's a bit of money coming their way. Yet to be seen. There wasn't much said about it on the weekend, whether it was a one race deal or whether it was a continuing thing. Interesting though, with the Stone Brothers connection, and the Stone Brothers used to run that livery. I wonder if there's a bit more going on there. And of course, the paint job that we all love to see each week, Nick Perkett ran a Holden livery this week. Bit of an interesting slogan on there, future-proof your future. As the car company Holden seems to be struggling a bit, and yeah, these kind of marketing things. This is kind of something that a new entrant to the marketplace, like a Hyundai or someone like that, would have been bringing in kind of 15-20 years ago. Not probably the biggest brand of car maker in Australia. Yeah. Anyway, won't dwell on their marketing department too much. But the paint job, a bit of a look back at kind of like an old HRT or Young Lions kind of livery. Looks quite good. Probably could have done a little bit better, but not a bad effort for a one-off. Of course, we saw the Tim Blanchard Patronus, or Petronus, as Scaife kept saying it all weekend, and correcting Crompton. That wasn't annoying in the telecast at all, was it? The car looked great under lights. I wish we were seeing this for the rest of the year. And talking about Timmy, he actually did a pretty respectable job all weekend. I expected him to kind of be stone cold last, and he wasn't. Yeah, not a bad effort there, Tim. The Kellys came out with a bit of a revised livery with some highlights on the cars, or reflective material for the under the lights, and they put neons underneath the cars, and as you can see in the promo shots, looks great. In reality, it was a bit of a letdown. A few of the other teams did a similar kind of thing. Techno ran some like LEDs around the front lights and the front grille, and things like that. It was a better job than what the teams did last year. Still a little bit of room for improvement. Speaking of improvement as well, the Penrite one was a bit of a letdown. I thought they're probably better off just leaving the cars as they were. The gold reflective that they used really didn't do much for me. But let's not worry about the letdowns. One that really stood out. Ford made special illuminated Mustang badges for the front grille on the cars, and I reckon they looked amazing. That was really well done. That was a good call by Ford, and the 6 Mustangs out there were all wearing them, and yeah, the A+ for that one. That was a really good effort, and hopefully we see more things like that next year. I assume that we're going to see a nighttime race again next year. It seemed to work well this year. In other news, Jack LeBrock was confirmed to race a Techno car for the rest of the year. Some people were saying the check finally cleared. I've also heard that maybe certain people were holding on to checks until certain guarantees were made that parts were going to be bought for the car, and maybe it brought up to spec a bit. Either way, it's good to see Jack out there for the rest of the year, getting more experience. Hopefully the car improves to match his ability, but then we are talking about kind of, okay, people will comment about this, but really you're talking about probably the 24 best drivers in the country out there. Okay, there's probably a few that might deserve a seat more than a couple of others, but in general, these guys are really high level, and there's no kind of tools in the field like what we might have seen kind of, even 10, 15 years ago. Now they're all top level guys these days. And for hair watch over the weekend, Shane Van Gisbergen's getting a really good beard happening, but then without the hat on, he just totally shaved the top. I'm not sure he's going for a bit of a bikey look or something. Leave your hat on for the rest of the year, Shane, please. And Chaz had a new haircut. Bit of a coincidence that Roger Penske was in town. Maybe he had some meetings with Roger, and the Penskes usually have a very clean cut look to the drivers. So Chaz with his big hairdo, that got a bit of a cutback, and I noticed he was cleanly shaven. Putting on a good face for the new boss, possibly. We'll see what happens. So there was some racing over the weekend. We saw McLaughlin again take a couple of poles. Tried to slow his Mustang down, didn't seem to have worked. I think we might see a little less of the parity talk though, seeing as though Jamie's back to being the #1 Commodore, so that should keep Roland a bit quiet. There's probably a bit of stress there in the Triple Eight team with Shane being the fastest of the Commodores at times, and then you had Dave, and then you had BJR beating him. James back on top, so that'll probably keep Roland happy. In race 11, we saw Scott try and make things a bit interesting by duffing the start. Later turned out that the clutch was a bit iffy, needed some adjustment. But in the end, Fabian came through and won with Scott in second, a nice 1-2 in front of the big boss. And timely result for Coulthard as well. His results have probably been a little bit lacking this year in comparison to his teammate, but you got the big boss in town, you win in front of him, and you're also second in the championship. You might get re-signed for next year. In the next few weeks, I think I might cover a bit what's the driver market and that for next year. And definitely Fabian's seat is one of the available seats, and it is probably the most sought after seat in the field. Although being Scott's teammate probably hasn't been the best place for some drivers in the past. Fabian's doing an alright job, but when you look at the results, he definitely isn't on the same level as Scott, and Penske might make a move to try and get someone, that's kind of up at that level. So, they kind of 1-2 every weekend. That's kind of what I'd be looking for, I think, from the results. An interesting little tidbit as well from the race. Scotty was the only one to put on 2 tyres in the pit stop. Everyone else changed all 4 tyres. Scott just changed to 2, probably saving a few tyres for the tie bank for the Saturday race, but also in that because you've got limited guys in the pits, you can only have 4 guys changing tyres in the pits. So if you're changing all 4, you essentially have 1 guy on each tyre, whereas if you only change 2, it means you put 2 guys on each tyre. So you effectively halve your pit stop time when you do that, which came in good later on then, because Scott was able to jump Jamie in the pits and go on to finish second. Speaking again of Jamie, we had the interesting point at the end of the race where Shane was coming up behind him, and they called over the radio for Jamie to move over, and he came over the radio and basically said, "No, I'm not listening to you." The commentators kind of, the next day, "Oh, Jamie's so great," and rah, rah, and this isn't the first time he's ignored people on the radio, and this time it didn't get him into trouble, but a lot of other times got him into trouble. Probably the most recent was at Phillip Island, where they told him when the wheel was loose, and they actually told him on the radio to pull over, not continue. And then he ignored them, continued going. The wheel totally fell off, and he ended up damaging the car, causing a safety car, all things like that. And I think a lot of, if a lot of other drivers out there, if they'd done something like this, they'd, you know, everyone would be on their backs about it. And for some reason, Jamie keeps getting away with ignoring these calls from the pits. We don't need to go into certain calls at Bathurst that he's ignored over the years right now. And of course, at the end of the day, we had another all Mustang podium. Of course, the two Team Penske Mustangs up front, I nearly said Falcons, and then Chaz rounded out the podium, which are a great return to form for Chaz in the place where he had his first Tickford victory, and he also made his debut, incidentally, for DJR at the time. Okay, for race 12, and things were looking up and up for Scott even before the start. He had 2 sets of green tyres left before the start of the race, while there was nobody else had a green set of tyres left as far as I know. And what that means is the green set's a set that hasn't been used. So Scott got through qualifying with effectively using 8 tyres less than anybody else. Potentially, you know, I did mention he saved those 2 from the day before, but still, you know, to do that and to have such a margin on the field is kind of unbelievable. This is not the Mustang being a better car. This is just a guy, like, you know, a driver and the engineer just working to, you know, they're on the next level compared to everybody else. We unfortunately saw Chaz have a broken engine, and all the good work he's been doing so far this year kind of, you know, it's a bit of a kick in the guts to have a result like that. But I'm sure he'll bounce back, and you know, he's come back from worse. Now, the 2 kind of incidents during the race, I'll start with the second one first, which was the Rick Kelly and Shane Van Gisbergen restart incident. So basically what happened was they had the restart, and you're allowed to overlap before the control line, which is kind of the start-finish line, but you're not allowed to overtake before then. And Shane had actually got a little bit of a run on Rick, and then Rick moved over on him. Now, you have to leave a car width on that, so they both kind of moved across the track together, and then when Shane got to the white line, he stopped moving over, obviously, and Rick didn't realise that Shane had the overlap, and then, so, you know, contact was made, and Rick turned around and said, look, yeah, it was my fault. I misjudged. You know, it's dark out there. Mirrors are small. You know, we made a mistake. Let's move on. Which is really good from Rick. You know, a lot of other people that have a big cry about it and start, you know, saying Shane's so rough, blah blah blah. You know, get the Kleenex out and, you know, suck it up, princess. Of course, the other crash which caused the safety car with all that was the Pye and Heimgartner incident. Now, Heimgartner's turning into one of these drivers that seems to be getting involved in incidents that he doesn't need to, and Pye does a bit of a similar thing, but there's certain guys out there, Fabian Coulthard, Will Davison, and Heimgartner's trying to get into this club, and it seems to be, if, you know, there's a bit of a questionable incident, they seem to, you know, they're involved in it, and, you know, they seem to, like, they haven't quite given enough room or something like that, and they might not be at fault, but you kind of, some of the guys, and Shane Van Gisbergen is very good at this, at kind of reading the play, and if you've got someone diving down the inside, you'll see Van Gisbergen a lot of the time will leave them a little bit of extra room, and you get used to certain drivers, like, you know, say Shane Van Gisbergen, if he's having a dive on you, get out of the way because he's coming through, kind of thing. Whereas there's certain drivers, like, say a Coulthard or a Will Davison or Andre Heimgartner, that someone's diving down the inside of them, and they kind of, you know, they half block, half give them a bit of room, like, who knows what's happening, and then these incidents happen, and you know, a simple thing where if you've given a bit of room or something, and I'm not talking about being a pushover, but there's certain drivers that, you know, they're coming through regardless. And I think if you were coming up behind, you know, like a Heimgartner now, you're Scott Pye coming into there, you know that Heimgartner's going to do a bit of a half-assed move, so you're going to bomb it in there harder to make sure that you pull it off. You're not going to, like if you're doing it on the Van Gisbergen, you kind of go, right, I know this guy's going to realise that I'm coming, he'll give me a bit of room, we'll be fine. And I think maybe you might be seeing a bit of this now where they're going, right, this guy's going to be a bit 50-50. I'm going to dive in there hard and go at it hard. And, you know, this is kind of causing more incidents and getting you involved in more incidents. And, you know, it's unfortunate for these guys because they were in the top, I think at the time they were running about 5th and 6th. And they're both looking at having a top 10, which in the current environment for both of them, especially the Walkinshaw guys, you know, top 10's a good results. And, you know, it all went down the drain and, you know, both guys... Scott didn't finish the race, and Andre, I think he had to have a couple of extra pit stops and things like that to fix things, and you know they finished nowhere, and you know it's a bit of a waste of a weekend. So after all was said and done, of course Scott McLaughlin still leads the championship. Fabian Coulthard's 124 behind. You know it's pretty close. We've then got Shane Van Gisbergen, 322 behind. Now, I was on this graphic, I was going to just put people who were 300 points within, which 300 points is, you know, effectively an event, 150 points for each race. But with now Shane Van Gisbergen third, 322 behind, you know, it looks a bit sad if I just put the two Penske drivers there as people who are still in the championship. Dave Reynolds is now 375 behind. Starting to drift away, and then Chaz Mostert in 5th, 402 behind. So now, I mean, if say Scotty, you know, breaks down at say Bathurst or Sandown, you know, the single races where there's 300 points available, then all of a sudden, you know, some of these guys are straight back in the hunt, or you know, you could have a couple of bad rounds, things like that. You know, they could lose their way, but it's already starting to look very good for them. So the only other note I've got down here over the weekend is this Bunnings Power Pass Power Play. Another marketing thing, like who thought of that? It just sounds ridiculous every time Neil Crompton says it. And then, okay, some of the passes have been a bit questionable, but I like the idea of the thing, but to name it that, it's, yeah. It's easy to say Pirtek Perth SuperNight. So, on that note, that wraps up the weekend. I thought the night racing was amazing. It was really interesting having Sunday free, a race weekend, and then it didn't have any racing to watch on Sunday. So that was, in some ways, it was nice having the racing on the nights. You know, it didn't kind of impact the day. Although I will have to admit, on the both nights I was starting to struggle a bit towards the end of the races to stay awake. It was getting a bit late for me, so you know, maybe if we could start them, you know, maybe half an hour or an hour earlier next year. You know, and I hear the people in New Zealand had an even tougher time than us because they're another 3 hours behind. So, but overall it was great. It looks spectacular with the fireworks and the flamethrowers and things like that. They come up great on TV. I've actually had a few people who aren't kind of fans of the sport come up to me and say that they'd watched the racing on the weekend and that the cars looked great and things like that. So hopefully it costs a lot to light these places, but hopefully maybe if you know a couple of them get permanent lighting and things like that, might be something that we see in the future. So on that note, I'll see you later.
Put away your inhibitions, let the beast in you just get loose. We all young, wild and